Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this week, the Kalispell Chamber's webinar on managing your business finances and workforce through COVID-19. We're pleased today to be joined by a group of other chambers of commerce, economic, and tourism development organizations in Northwest Montana for this seminar. So welcome as well to those groups. And we're pleased to be joined by Bob Nystuen, Market President for Glacier Bank, with 40 years plus of experience in the banking industry here in Montana and the region, and Kristen Heck, the President of LC Staffing, with offices in Kalispell, Bozeman, and Missoula. I think you're going to enjoy this program and find it informative with great tips for helping support your business finances and workforce through this crisis we're all dealing with. But a few things to get started. First, this is a series that occurs every Tuesday from 2 to 3. Last week we had the details on business relief programs, the CARES Act. That's available online. We've got our two speakers today. And next week we'll have a congressional report on the action related to congressional action around the CARES Act with Representative Greg Gianforte. So all these recorded for you to listen to in case you don't catch all of it or want to review at a future date. And one item of housekeeping: at the bottom of your screen or wherever your menu bar is, in the very center, you'll see a box marked Q&A. So this is your opportunity to click on that, type in your questions, and we'll have about 15 or 20 minutes at the end, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bob Nystuen.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. Can you see me and hear me okay? Are we good, Joe? So far, so good?
You got it. Looks good, Bob.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Joe, the first thing I wanted to do is to show you, I decided to have a little water this afternoon. And here is a pint glass from the Mountain Madness Air Show, June 19th and 20th of 1999.
All right. I love it.
And by the way, it's got water in it this afternoon.
Yeah. When you said water, I thought you said lager.
So noted, so noted. So, but it is truly a pleasure to be able to reach out to the chamber group for this. I see we have almost 100 folks that have joined us today. So hats off to the Kalispell Chamber for adopting this new form of technology and so forth to basically convey important information. So again, thank you for doing that. And really, my topic today is to really talk about some insights as to managing a so-called essential business during this COVID-19. By way of background, our Glacier Bank branches here in Western Montana, we have 16 of them here in Western Montana. We have 9 branches here in Flathead County, Whitefish, Columbia Falls, Big Fork, Kalispell, Lakeside, and we have 2 branches in Lincoln County, Libby, Eureka, 2 in Lake County, Polson, Ronan, 2 in Butte, and 1 in Anaconda. Our division manages we have 350 employees in those 16 branches. Glacier Bank Corp, who's our parent company, is also headquartered in Kalispell. They have, across the entire footprint, over 3,000 employees in 8 Western states. Our company, which again is headquartered here in Kalispell, stretches from Eureka to Yuma, Arizona. So it's quite a footprint. So it's always interesting. On Friday, March 20th, we elected to close our bank lobbies, deciding to operate out of our 16 drive-in bank locations and our Glacier Bank Operations Center on the south side of Kalispell, but then still offer kind of a very limited opportunity for lobby access, to sign loan papers. Sometimes people need to get into the safe deposit boxes and so forth, but basically we've closed our lobbies now. We're into our 3rd week. We've completed about 2.5 weeks really operating out of our drive-in. We made this decision early on to not lay off or furlough any of our employees. And that's something we kind of put that stake in the ground early. which was, you could imagine, pretty enthusiastically received by our employees. We said, if you feel 100%, you feel well enough to come to work at 100%, then please come to work. We may very well find other things for you to do than your normal, let's say you open accounts or you have teller responsibilities in our main offices. There's other things that we can do. So if you feel 100%, we want you coming to work. We have had employees, of course, like perhaps your businesses with childcare issues, especially with schools closed, daycares closed, and so forth. But we've worked with as many, we've basically brought on as many laptops that we could to allow employees to work from home. Other employees who cannot work, our HR team has defined how we handle each employee's situation. We call it a decision tree. Ask a question, if this, then this is the answer. If no, then we go a different direction and so forth. Today, I would tell you in the Kalispell Chamber, we have about 15% of our 350 employees unable to come to work. And that doesn't include the people that are working from home. To date, knock on wood, we've had employees tested for COVID-19, but no positives from the 350 employees in our Glacier Bank division. We have, however, had 2 employees in our entire company out of 3,000 that have tested positive, and I think they're doing okay. So what's it like managing Glacier Bank now that we're in the middle of week number 3? Well, without jinxing it, so far, steady as she goes is how I'd say it. Our employees have really embraced kind of their new work environment. They don't like it operating this way, but that's the way it is. We take strong measures to practice social distancing and more. You know, we handle a lot of currency, customer paperwork, and we take all the extra precautions we possibly can during these times. For nearly 3 weeks, we set up a daily conference call with our branch managers and department heads. When we first started, we elevated the communications to a whole new level here. We always started with our HR. Deb Broadbent is our HR manager. She always started with a daily update. Here's what I'm seeing. These are the questions. These are the issues, to really give everybody kind of an idea of how we're doing as a bank. Now, believe it or not, the headliners are the folks in our lending teams. They are absolutely inundated with business. So here are a few observations for Glacier Bank as to how we're doing. Teller transactions, certainly we've seen some tail off in the number of teller transactions, but not a lot. Essential businesses are still doing business. People still get other checks to deposit and so forth. Our ATMs have seen a big spike up in the amount of activity. But you know, we are now kind of awaiting the next influx of teller activity as it relates to when people start actually receiving their federal stimulus checks, or the checks that we're going to see from the federal government. Again, they'll be direct deposited, but we do know that people will perhaps come down and get big money orders or whatever to do some business. Our call center volume, it's just absolutely spiked up. Normally, we answer the phone, Glacier Bank, 5,600 times per week, 5,600 times a week. Some days that number is up 30%, and on Mondays, it's up 50%. I know yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock on a Monday, we had already answered the phone 2,000 times for our 16 branches here in Western Montana. So customers are reaching out to us to help them with electronic banking and so forth. Home mortgage areas. We, in a typical month, will close about $20 million in home loans. That's a big month for us. In the month of February, we took $30 million in loan applications in mortgage lending. And in March, it was up to $45 million in applications. I would tell you right now, about 50% of that is refinances, but the other 50% are home purchases and home construction loans. We're closing a remarkably high number of, ordering a remarkably high number of appraisals each week, 40 to 50 appraisals a week for our business. Each day, we're getting a manageable number of requests from the Consumer Loan Department for payment extensions or deferrals. The area at the bank that we're seeing extraordinarily high volume activity is our Commercial Lending Department. In a given month, we normally process about 50 commercial loans a month. Right now, we have over 600 SBA Payment Protection Program loans in our pipelines. We started working on them over this past weekend, and as of right now, I think we've processed over $35 million, probably more than that, in the number of approved SBA loans so far. I need to be real emphatic here that we're triaging each loan request that comes in. Our first priority is our customers, businesses that need those dollars the most. Second is our deposit customers, including nonprofits. Third, as we can, non-customers. We know not all financial institutions in our area are offering the PPP program. We are, but the volume, like I said, is overwhelmingly high. Our commercial lenders and their support team and our branch managers are all in. We want to do every loan that we can, but we need to manage our way through all of this and hope that everybody really understands we're doing our best to help. There are other SBA programs available. It's on their website, but for now, we're all in and trying to manage through the SBA PPP program. Allow me to offer a few other best practices for managing through the COVID-19 times. Number one, we stress every day on every call, first thing out of the chute is your safe work environment. For us, again, if you don't feel 100%, don't come into work. We've actually sent people home that just have a little bit of the sniffles. We tell you what, you go home, get well, come back when you can. Number two, elevating your communications game with your employees, your customers, your suppliers, and your stakeholders. They need your calming, steady guidance and support. Number three, take time to think about what your team and your business needs in the future. I would tell you smart, astute business owners and individual borrowers, even with cash in the bank, are asking for payment deferrals and extension. Our philosophy is we made good loans to good people in good times. You know what? There's still good loans to good people. So we need to remember that when times are not so good. Number four, low interest rates will be here for an incredibly long period of time. No need to rush down to the bank today to refi tomorrow. Those rates will be here for a while. Number five, think about and help less fortunate folks in our communities. They need us more than ever. Last week, our Glacier Bank board approved $20,000 in donations to 15 area food banks here in Western Montana. We also asked our employees and our directors to consider personal donations. Today, our employees and directors have also pledged over $15,000 in personal donations to help the food banks. Those food banks, like a lot of social service agencies, have a huge demand for services. Their demand is skyrocketed from people for the very first time needing to go to food banks. Food bank inventories are low, especially for essential items such as baby products and other things like that. And if you've been to a food bank, oftentimes you see their volunteers are oftentimes seniors. And a lot of times those seniors aren't able to come to work. And then paying for their staff is expensive if you can find the work. So the food banks, in our opinion, really deserved a boost up, and that's why we committed those dollars. Also, there's plenty of needs from the medical providers, first responders, and a lot of other social service agencies that need possible. We want to, again, thank Joe and the Kalispell Chamber. They're deserving of any support along the way as well. So what I'd like to do is sum up before I throw it over to my friend Kristen Heck, that finally, we don't know how long this is all going to last, but we can't predict what happens from here with our business community, the state, and nationally. But I am 100% certain we truly live in the best place to be when the economy turns positive. We're seeing already, I'm getting calls from people on the West Coast wanting to be here as opposed to being in the urban jungles on the East Coast and the West Coast. In closing, Joe, thanks again for this opportunity, and with total conviction, I send you all a message in Glacier Bank's assurances that better days are ahead. So with that, I'll throw it over to you, Joe. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bob. Some great wisdom there from a lot of experience, and I'll introduce now Kristen Heck. I think her slideshow is up. Kristen, thanks for joining us today, and I'll throw it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for asking us to be a part of your webinar today. LC Staffing is in a unique position because of the relationships that we have with so many businesses across Montana to hear firsthand what they're experiencing and what they're doing in response to that. So I've prepared a slide deck here. We're going to get through it pretty quick, and these slides will be available to you all later. So next slide, please. This is a very difficult time for most businesses that we're speaking to. As we all know, this started some time ago with the hospitality industry that's really been devastated by that. I want you to think about all the event staffing and hospitality related businesses in the Valley and across Montana. And then with the shelter in place order or stay at home directive, most all businesses have since then been affected, the same as hospitality. In the last 2 to 3 weeks, organizations have had to adapt to an enormous amount of disruption and change, and companies who were able to fashion some workarounds are surviving. Not all businesses can do this, and many are partially or completely shut down. As a matter of fact, we recently sent out a survey to our customers, and about 35 of those we heard back from said that their business was shut down or closed permanently because of COVID. Next slide, please. So in the past month, business leaders have had some really important objectives to achieve. And I don't know about you guys, but the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've just been running like a mad person to keep up with all the changes. We've had to learn and adapt the new business and employers plan to respond to coronavirus disease. We had to bring that into our businesses and apply all of those best practices. We had to develop real-time measurement and adaptation of rapidly dwindling or no revenues. We had to make tough decisions around furloughs, compensation cuts, hours reduction, shift schedule changes, and/or keeping your staff that you really can't afford right now. We had to make tough decisions on other expense cuts, including vendors, projects, expansion, hiring. We had to manage slowing receivables and bad debt. We had to learn and apply all the new FFRCA rules. And for a couple of weeks, employers were very concerned with their ability to be able to pay for that leave of their employees. Thankfully, there was relief for some of that in the act. We had to learn how to facilitate employees working from home. We had to develop a system of engagement and accountability. And for some of these businesses, that meant online interviewing, hiring, onboarding, orientation, and training. We had to keep essential employees safe, working, and develop a plan for those who can't. Business owners had to find a time to be a part of the solution in their community, state, also for their customers and with their employees. They had to find new revenue streams, if they had time, to work on business development. And some businesses have been trying to figure out if and how the CARES Act could help their business with limited available information. Next slide, please. Before I begin here, I just want to talk a little bit about impacts on businesses. We just talked about the list that everybody has to get through. And I would say our operations staff in all of our business are really the heroes right now. Those are people who are typically behind the scenes, and they had to drop all their normal responsibilities to quickly adapt, to work overtime to plan for worst case scenarios and prep for them. They had to handle risk management, rollout and training and compliance of new best practices around the FFCRA and CARES Act. And I just want to applaud everyone out there who's had to do all of these things. It was a big lift, and now we're ready for the next set of challenges. Over the weekend, we surveyed hundreds of business owners across Western Montana because we have those connections. We had responses from 93 of those so far, and we're sharing those responses today. 66 of those businesses, 66%, excuse me, have had a drop in revenue. 12% had an increase in revenue. 32% of businesses have seen new opportunities. About half will continue normal business operations once the pandemic subsides, but 37% will need to make up for that lost revenue. Next slide, please. So how long will these effects remain? I think that's a big question mark for a lot of people. I think this depends on how far things stretch out. 34 respondents said 4 to 8 months. 28% said to last less than 4 months. 17% expect it to last longer than a year. And 18% expect 8 months to a year. And that would be this situation's effect on their business. Next slide, please. So we asked the question about if and how long does your organization expect to see lasting effects of the coronavirus to staff and business operations. 48% of respondents said they've had to lay off staff. 27% have employees performing other than normal job duties. 25% are changing how they onboard new employees, and 70% have slowed or stopped hiring. Next slide, please. So other, sorry, I thought I was missing a slide there. Okay, very good. Sorry, you guys are on track here. So the new norm, I guess, for a lot of us that we're adapting to now is that essential and some non-essential businesses have adapted to still be able to meet or deliver on customer needs. I'm sure we've all experienced that lobbies, showrooms, stores are not open to customers, but ask for anything you want, they'll go grab it for you and bring it curbside or deliver. This is an example of a very quick adaptation and a great solution to provide for their customers and hopefully maintain some revenue. And the big question mark is this our new norm and for how long? And the more we can adapt to the current situation, perhaps the less impact it will have on our employees and the health of our business in the long run. Next slide, please. So we also asked a question, how are you working differently and how have your priorities changed? There's several comments here. I'm not going to read them all, but we've learned about shift changes, separating employees, working from home, really beefing up all of your offerings online, of course, furloughs and moving people around on staff. Next slide, please. One of the comments here was our in-house childcare workers are now working in assembly, and our press and bindery operators are now working in kitting. And sales teams are now doing outbound, whereas prior everything was all inbound sales activity. Towards the bottom, our 2020 business plan has been put on the back burner as we evaluate temporary expense reduction options to make up for expected revenue declines. Next slide, please. Some businesses have been very impacted, and you will see that by some of these comments that you read. Other companies are having all their workforce working from home. Some, I did hear from more than one business that they have seen decreased productivity from that. But all in all, really not much complaint in that particular area. And then more training of staff and getting to opportunities or tasks for things that could be done to work on the business. Next slide, please. I also have pages of comments about long-term business impacts. Again, we have a short period of time here, but in general, the consensus is that as we come out of this, you know, are we going to be facing a recession? And in particular, are people going to spend money? Because obviously people have quit spending money, and that has an impact across the board for all our local businesses. With that in mind, you know, I think we also want to be in conversation with our customers and our vendors who may be challenged with some things. If your customers aren't being paid, can they pay you? And if your vendors are not being paid or can't get the inputs or services that they need, then what is your backup plan or course of action that you would need to take and when? And are your customers and vendors complying with the best practices for the new protections and acts? And if not, how can you assist so that your business is not exposed or affected. Okay, next slide, please. So under the new FFRCA rules, I think employers need to prepare and plan for some staff choosing to leave the work environment to care for children or a sick family member, or they have a COVID illness or exposure. And they may choose to work from home or not, but regardless, they will likely be eligible for paid benefits. We are starting to hear from employers now that have these vacancies in their workforce because people have elected to be home. And, you know, in fairness, it's been pretty rough for young families with kids at home, trying to work and teach their kids. And, you know, I think it makes sense for us to give people the benefit of the doubt in this situation. If you have concerns about employee working from home, ask questions and get clarity. Remember, this is really weird for employees too. And just encouragement to be extra graceful in this season. And of course, to be careful of any perceived retaliation if someone does want to be home with their family. Think about if you'll need to fill in a replacement, how will you staff that? How will you add to your own payroll? Or do you want to bring on supplemental staff? I think in this time, we're all asking our team members to do more, and that's okay. But you know, if this goes on and on, we want to be careful not to overload yourself and your great staff. I encourage all of us to be working on our plan for when the shelter in place is lifted and best practice is adapted. So how we can get staffed up and trained. I think most businesses here have an increase in business in the busy time of year. And so, you know, maybe we will have that opportunity to recover quickly and go after that business. Also think about what your customers and vendors will do. Next slide, please. I put some brief information in here for you on the Paycheck Protection Program. There's a lot of information out there about it, but this is some recent language I wanted to put in there. If you as an employer have either laid off staff or are considering laying off staff and have questions about the loan forgiveness portion of that as it relates to layoffs, this is some good language here. And of course, we're going to be learning about all sorts of new final rulings as this comes through. So we're all just operating based on the amount of information available to us now. Next slide, please. So we all wish that we had a crystal ball to know when we'll be able to resume our business to our full potential. And for some of us, that could be this summer or later. And for some of us, it's business as usual right now. But how long will it last? What's coming up next? Will there be more stops and starts of shelter-in-place orders? Will there be a seasonal ramp up and when? Employers may face recruiting issues around a lack of workforce due to lack of or no J-1 visa workforce this year in our valleys. They're a huge part of the seasonal workforce. New generous unemployment benefits are in effect and will be there until the end of July, which can affect recruiting. And lasting concerns of the COVID exposure. So right now, I think we all need to be, and Bob did such a great job of articulating this as well, thinking about making sure our employer brand exemplifies safety, and that we're putting that out as our first message, and we're really communicating around that a lot with our people and potential new employees. We are facing all of these challenges right now because we are actually recruiting some essential roles that we're trying to fill, and these are 3 issues that we're hearing back from candidates on for reasons that they would not be interested in a job. Hiring supplemental or seasonal staff through a staffing firm is a best practice that employers use in times of economic flux. Is it the right time to add permanent payroll and benefits right now? Will I have time to recruit, screen, and communicate? Or is that best to outsource while we focus on we must accomplish in business. So all of us have to consider, we don't have our crystal ball. So what is our backup plan if we can't get the workforce that we need? And are your vendors and customers experiencing the same issues? How will this impact your business during your busiest season? So let's prepare for that now. And there are some resources. If you click on that link, that will take you to information. I know everybody's probably been overloaded out there, but if, for example, someone needs a leave request form or more information around FFCRA, there's a lot of information available to you there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kristen and Bob. Very informative. And I'd like to remind our listeners that if you go to your menu bar, toolbar, in the center of it is a box called Q&A. We're taking written questions. So if you have a question for either Bob or Kristen or both, just go ahead and type in your question and it'll appear on our screen, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. But maybe I'll kick things off for you both, Bob and Kristen. So you are leaders of both of your organizations, and you're operating in multiple branches. Bob, I think you said 16 branches, and Kristen, you're in the major growth communities of the state in Kalispell and Missoula and Bozeman, and so different markets, but really some top growth areas. And as the leaders of your business, you got into that a little bit, but tell us more about how you've had to change in this environment, your leadership approach, or any tips you want to share about the way you've had to differ your approach or amplify something about what you do to help lead your teams through this environment we're in. And yeah, Bob, why don't we start with you?
Okay, thank you, Joe. We certainly have had to adjust our ability to work with our folks. We oftentimes would have face-to-face meetings starting Monday morning with our kind of roundtable as to department heads and all those kind of things. Well, now we virtually all call into one conference line. So we're missing that camaraderie and the ability to share a cup of coffee or a cinnamon roll or something like that with each other. We really practice the social distancing at the bank and beyond. So, I mean, it's unfortunate we can't see the whites of each other's eyes, and that, however, everybody has been more than supportive of our ability to do it. But I would tell you the vast majority of my day as the president of the bank is staying connected with our folks. At 10 a.m. every day, we have 32 people dial in, and we give an update from what we know from our parent company, from our administrative team, and then we go around the horn and we just ask, what's new in your area? How's it going? We do get updates and things like that. So we really want our branches to feel well connected, and their staff, as to how we're doing here. If it's an important question from one branch, you know what, it's going to be the same thing in all of them. And it could be from our team down in Southwest Montana that's a few hundred miles away from us here. So we've really had to adapt accordingly in that area. We really try to, as the leader of the bank, and I'm sure Kristen would say the same thing in her organization, a lot of people watch us as the leaders as to how we behave, and again, being calm, steady, continuing to provide assurance. Keeping a sense of humor is still important to be able to do that. Passing along a funny once in a while if we can. Whatever we can do just to continue to show that we're all in it together. Last Friday, as an example, my wife Kim wrote an ode to the darn virus, and it was kind of a poem that she wrote in honor of the work that our employees are doing. And that's not everybody's style to do that. I get that, but it does kind of humanize us all being working together here. So I think, again, a lot of it, Joe and Kristen referenced it, had to do with the communications and how important it is that we, as the leaders, set the tone, set the pace, that they can depend on us for getting the answers and staying in touch with them. So, Kristen, your thoughts?
Thanks, Bob. So probably about 3 weeks ago, I had a heads up on a lot of what was going to be coming to our area because I have, staffing firm owners on the East Coast and West Coast who are dealing with these issues before us. So that was an advantage to kind of see things coming. Sat down with our team about 3 weeks ago and said, hey, there's a storm coming upon us. And this storm is going to have a beginning and a middle and an end. And right now we're in the beginning and we got to prep for this storm. And then really, we spent a lot of time putting all our plans into place for worst case scenario. When I talked about those strong operations people, really relied heavily on those operations people to bring me solutions of what we could do for us and for our customers. And really tapping into that greater sense of purpose with our people, talking about the why and how important it is that we can staff essential businesses and help calm people's fears and be a resource to our client. I think also I learned a couple of lessons, of course, we all learn lessons along the way, but there was more fear than I really understood and appreciated among our team members. And I think as entrepreneur leaders, we sometimes just power through stress and fear. It sometimes just fuels us. But you can't tell people how to feel. And for me to tell people not to be afraid wasn't very effective. There's a lot of talk out there about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, security and safety before self-actualization. And until our people felt safe, which in this case was to work from home, even though we are considered an essential business, they couldn't bring their best selves. And so we made that decision, and it was definitely the right decision. We had been doing that for other staff members before the shelter in place who had compromised family members or something like that. But, again, I learned that the fear of this invisible enemy can be rather debilitating for some people. And we need to have a very willing, open ear and listen and provide frontline solutions for our people. Whatever we can do as business owners and leaders to show up and not ask anyone to do what we're not willing to do ourselves in the business. And then I just also want to say, I think being extra generous during this time, it's hard because I'm not making as much money. We're all not making as much money, but now is the time to double down and be generous. Order in lunches, extra perks or bonuses. It matters more now than at any other time. And I think every day people have to hear about how important they are to what's happening right now and to our communities. People want to know that what they're doing really matters.
All right, thanks for that. Let's go to a couple of questions from our audience. And here's a quick one. What is your stance on having employees wear masks in the workplace?
Kristen, you want to go first?
Sure, Bob. I'll tell you, I would love it. The biggest issue, as I see it, is the availability of masks. So until we can help people maybe fashion their own mask, which I would love to see something like that. How can we use things that we have in our home to make our own masks? Because I've tried for weeks to find masks for my other home care business. And, those resources really need to be available to hospitals and medical professionals at this time. I think that has been a best recommendation put out by the administration. And I love that idea. I think we're just going to have to get resourceful, each person individually, to figure out how to provide their own mask if employers can't get their hands on them.
And Joe and Kristen, from Glacier Bank's perspective, if we have somebody that would like to wear a mask, we're certainly not discouraging it. We would encourage it if they so choose, but it's probably an individual preference right now.
Okay, a good tip. Kristen, this is perhaps for you. Regarding laid off employees, what are you seeing? How are they coping with if they're laid off without health care? And what are you seeing in terms of like an employer attached furlough status? Are you seeing some of that come with extension of healthcare premiums or not? Can you just sort of talk about what you're seeing out there with extension of healthcare benefits on this temporary layoff situation?
Sure, you bet. And I see the question on here. Most of the time, I would assume employees who've been laid off, I guess it depends on the circumstance. My understanding and impression is that if an employee is furloughed, the employer continues to pay for their benefits, healthcare benefits. So that would be my first understanding. That may not be correct, but that's how I would take that. If anybody has lost their employment, they should be applying for COVID, or excuse me, COBRA benefits to extend their coverage. But I think if the intent is for an employer to bring someone back, within a short period of time, I would assume that the employer would continue to pay for that benefit.
Yeah, good tip. And we're hearing about that. I don't have any data, but we are hearing about folks that are on this employer-attached furlough status being able to keep it a healthcare benefit. I don't know about a full slate of benefits, but at least a healthcare. So something for folks to be considering out there. And let's see. Let's see. Bob, talk about just sort of, what you did talk a little bit about the payroll protection plan and, just interest rates and the demand and so on. I know early on you were seeing a bit of needing some direction and so on, and then really getting hammered by applications. I know a lot of your bankers were working over the weekend. Can you just comment generally about how is it all starting to come together now, and what are you seeing in terms of guidance and support from the SBA and Treasury in order to get through all this?
Well, it certainly, we used to say we had 10% of the questions had answers and 90% we had to work on. And now we're more than 50% answers and 50% still kind of questions to be answered. So it's getting better. It took a long time. There was Treasury guidance that came out. People started interpreting that before the SBA kind of came out with their official guidance. We here in Montana have really worked solidly with the Montana SBA, and there are calls every day with Rena Carlson and the folks at the Montana SBA providing us guidance and updates. And, well, what do we do in this situation? What do we do with that? There was a lot of backlogs with regards to the ability to get lenders signed up to be able to transmit documents electronically to the SBA and so on. But a lot of those kinks are being worked out. I think we're virtually on the cusp of actually funding loans, having a borrower sign notes and fund deposits into accounts as we speak here. But there's just hundreds of them in the queue thereafter waiting to be done here. I saw the question about, is this all because of interest rates? No, I would say the people that are interested in moving into this area certainly will be able to afford more of a house, for example, because interest rates are down. Mortgage rates have really been whipsawed. There are certain types of mortgage programs that are not available into the secondary market because of the concern about where the secondary market's going. That's probably more than your listeners need to know, but we still are offering 15 and 30-year mortgage products, some in-house products and so forth. Rates are certainly not lower now than they were back at Christmas time. The prime rates have continued to drop as the funding costs of the bank have continued to drop. On the commercial side, consumer rates tend to follow the prime rate, which again has been downward. So it's really, it's a lot like gas prices. We didn't think we'd ever see the day when you drive past a gas station and see a gas for less than $2 a gallon. Well, we're facing a lot of that with regards to lending rates these days too. So the SBA PPP program, that's a different kettle of fish, if you will, with regards to their rates and structures. But again, it's all for the benefit of the worker and the small business. So, Joe, I know you had sent out a coronavirus emergency loan guideline that the U.S. Chamber put out. that was probably one of the best documents we've used to really provide guidance on SBA loan programs. So encourage your listeners to seek that out as well.
Oh, thanks for that, Bob. I'll pass on those words. Okay, we're about ready to wrap up. Let's take one or two more questions. And here's a nice, good softball question for you, Bob. And you got into this a little bit, but here's a listener who is planning to relocate to Seattle, right? And what are your thoughts and advice about moving to Kalispell?
Thank you, Joe, for that question, and thank you for the person. Yeah, I'd say this is a great place to do business. We are seeing, again, I mentioned early on the call, I was sitting at home the other night about 8 o'clock, and my phone lit up with cell phone lit up with a phone number from California, and I go, oh man, here's somebody wants to sell me extended warranty on my car or my cell phone plan or whatever. So I answered the call, and it was a guy who says, look, we have a mutual friend out in California. I've got $2 million. I want to get to the Flathead Valley as soon as possible. I'm tired of living in LA. Joe, I know that's your hometown, but he said, I got to get out of here. The politics and the business climate and all of what's going on here, I've got to find some sanity, and I'm ready to move here to the Flathead Valley. Can you point me towards a realtor? Can you talk to me about home mortgage options? Can you, all these kind of things, because I'm ready to move here. And I think that's kind of an undercurrent that we're feeling. And these days when we're all struggling with dealing with, at the moment, with the COVID-19 and all those kind of things here, we have been discovered here in Northwest Montana. And there will be quite a bit of people saying, I'm done. I'm moving back to where I can have a sense of comfort, peace, and a sense of normalcy once we come out of the virus situation here. And I think we're seeing it. We are seeing still the same number of construction loan requests today as we would see during the summers right now. Our contractors are busy. We talked to our friends one day at Sliders, Andrea and some of the other folks. We're seeing that their business activity continues to be very robust, with not only people building houses, but people doing honeydew projects and they got the time and so forth. So they're anxious. They want to do business right now. So it doesn't take long to drive around town and see trucks with trusses on them and contractors and things like that. This is going to be a good place for people to be once we pull out of the national funk that we're in with the virus. So I'm eternally optimistic that we're going to pull through this and be in good shape going forward.
That's a nice close for you, Bob. And Kristen, do you have any kind of final comments for our audience?
Well, sure. A couple of things. I think since we have so many people working from home, I just want to encourage us all as leaders to bear the duty and responsibility of providing the tools and the resources and the expectations and a high level of communication and consideration. Let's remember this is weird for our people too, but I've heard some frustrations from employers about managing people remotely. And I think it's our duty and responsibility as leaders for us to learn how to do that differently and to roll out those best practices with, of course, that cooperation and feedback from our team members. So it's really a time that we're kind of reinventing this work from home thing. And there could be some great competitive advantages for that in the future. It may open up a new workforce for us that we weren't able to otherwise capture because they maybe couldn't work full time outside of the home. So we have to see a lot of these things as opportunities too. I also saw a message on here on the Q&A about what sort of basic skills do you think will have high value as we emerge from this event later this year. And I think, we're going to see a lot of emerging opportunities as we come out of this. So I think we would love to see people who have a willingness to be a part of the solution in our community and to our business community. And one of the things I've learned from Bob that I really appreciate is we want people with hustle. We want people who want to work. We also want people who have a great consideration of others and what's important for our community.
Excellent. Great note to close on there. We didn't get to every question, but we'll try to follow up with answers on some of the other ones that have come in here. But our time has come to a close, and I want to extend our appreciation from the Chamber to both Bob Nystuen and joining us today and making time and providing really some wise counsel to all of us on finances and workforce and managing through this crisis. So thank you for that. Also to remind our audience that this slideshow has been recorded. It'll be available on our YouTube channel, and that'll be pushed out in the next couple issues of our Wednesday and Friday e-news. So you can find it there or on social media or post it on YouTube. And with that, I think we'll close and just remind you next week is Congressman Greg Gianforte with an update on congressional action on this Phase 3 bill or the CARES Act bill. They're contemplating some adjustments to that and discussing a Phase 4 bill that has to do with infrastructure development. He'll address all that in his remarks next Tuesday at the same time. And hey, I wish that all 100 plus give you a round of applause, but I'll give you a round of applause from my end. And thanks, Bob and Kristen, for a great job with us today. And with that, we'll sign off and see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.